You will be repaid. Amen. Please be seated. So Jesus' world, the world of the disciples, of Peter and Andrew, James and John, and the world of the Pharisees, Herod and Pilate. It was a broken world. It was a world where a whole lot of people went hungry and died young. It was a hard world of illness and violence, of poverty, grinding poverty. Some commentators say that as much as 90% of the population lived in survival mode. So if you like charts, Jesus' world would look like a very short, fat pyramid with a whole lot of people on the bottom and a very few on the top. So when, for instance, in the Lord's Prayer, Jesus has his disciples pray for daily bread, it wasn't so much a metaphor as it was praying for daily bread, for enough to eat. The Palestinian Jews of Jesus' day, they knew injustice inside and out. When Jesus taught his disciples to voluntarily go the second mile for Roman soldiers who wanted them to carry their heavy equipment, not wanted to, force them to, it wasn't abstract. This most likely happened on a fairly routine basis. So between the Romans and the temple, Jesus' people had a hard time making ends meet. They had a hard time keeping their dignity intact, a hard time remembering that they too were God's children, loved and wanted. And prejudice and power were especially poignant and painful in the most personal and the most political of places, which was the dinner table. The dinner table was not a private affair as we know it. The dinner table was central to how power was constructed, to who had power and who did not have power, who you ate with, who you invited to the table, who invited you to break bread and raise a toast and enjoy the evening. That table fellowship was how and where social and political and economic power were created. It was where alliances were manifested and maintained. It was how honor and status and privilege were built and bestowed. In Jesus' day, the personal was ever so political, and fellowship around the table stood at the very center. The dinner party, it was the party. And it's not hard to guess that there were a whole host of people who never got the invites, who never shared in the political alliances and the power-building networks, a whole lot of people who were left both metaphorically and literally hungry and out in the cold. A whole lot of people who probably never even registered in the minds of those on the inside, those with a seat at the table, those raising their glasses of wine and laughing at their inside jokes. It was a broken world. And my friends, our world, our 21st century world on a global scale, really not all that different, right? I mean, we're not the short, fat pyramid. We've got a whole lot more in the middle. But our world is broken in much of the same way. A whole lot of people on the outside who don't get a seat at the table, who don't get the invites and the opportunities to build connections and business alliances and wealth-generating social ties, who aren't included in the deal-making and the networking. I mean, maybe it's not literal dinner parties, but not too far from that, actually. I mean, I'm guessing if I asked each of us to make a list of 5 people that we would invite to share our Grateful Dead concert tickets with, or go out to a very fine dinner party, I'm guessing that the tattooed all over David, who sleeps at the warming shelter, wouldn't make it onto our list. And that's not wrong. That's not wrong. It's just the way it is. And it's just the way it is that people who have a lot of money tend to get better access to opportunities to make even more money. And people with power tend to send their children to schools where they make alliances with other families of similar backgrounds. It's the way it is that the families who are going to have the hardest time recovering from the floods in Louisiana are the families who had almost nothing to begin with and who have very limited social connections. It's the way it is that our detention centers, our jails, our prisons feature a whole lot of young black and brown faces. Or that those same young people have limited access to mental health care services and pollution-free neighborhoods. It's the way it is that we feel safer on Corral de Tierra than we do in some other parts of Salinas. And that statistically we are safer. And that's not just here in Salinas or in the United States, but worldwide. It's the way it is that not everyone gets to live in a safe place, or have safe drinking water, or be assured of proper medical care, or basic nutrition. Not everyone has access to the internet, or electricity, or friends, or loving connections. Brokenness. Brokenness is the nature of our world. Just as it was the nature of that world 2,000 years ago. But God's grace broke into that long ago Palestinian Jewish world in the form and in the person of Jesus, who was later called the Christ, the Anointed One, God's own agent. God's grace was poured out when Jesus, when he was invited to those inner circle dinner parties, he broke them open and made the circle inclusive. He practiced the politics of compassion, the politics of seeing each and every person as a child of a living God and worthy of connection, worthy of invitation, worth sitting next to and breaking bread with and sharing conversation with. Jesus challenged those sitting in self-satisfaction around that small table to make it bigger, to hire a carpenter if need be, and build it a whole lot bigger, and send out a raft of invites, especially to those who'd never gotten one before. Now, his instructions in this gospel reading, his instructions might on the surface just sound like table manners. Don't take the best place, the place of greatest honor, the place right next to the host. Take an unobtrusive place, a place that's far from the best. That way you won't be embarrassed if you're asked to move. Honestly, on the surface, it sounds like something your mom might say on your way out to the door to your first dinner party, your first company dinner, But there's a whole lot more going on in Jesus' table manner instructions. And we know that because of the last line of the gospel reading, which puts all of this in the long-term perspective of eternity, of your soul's welfare. And that is that in God's grace-filled kingdom, there is a kind of flattening, of straightening, and evening out, as John the Baptist predicted, of God's kingdom that Jesus inaugurated. The crooked places will be made straight, the valleys will be filled, and the mountains will be made low. It's a kind of flattening of position and power and privilege. Now, Jesus, of course, was raised by a fairly radical mom, who was also full of God's grace, and who taught him that in God's time the rich would be sent away empty and the poor would be filled with good things. I'm speaking, of course, of the Magnificat, which we recite if you do morning prayer or evening prayer. It's in every evening prayer. The Magnificat, we love it at Christmas, at Advent, on Mary's, when we celebrate Mary. It's this beautiful song, which we love, but we don't think about too much. Because Mary sings before Jesus is even born. She's singing the song of the prophets, a song about the world being turned upside down, about the first being last and the last being first, about the places of honor being given to those with least honor, and this is grace. This is God's grace broken in, coming into a broken world. But how is it grace, right? How is it grace for the rich to be empty, to lose their seat at the apex of power? How is that grace or good news? It's God's grace and salvation because when you're overstuffed and overburdened with unending desire and impossible to fulfill responsibilities, when the weight of the world is on your shoulders because you have so much, you get really, really tired. And the way to health and well-being is to be able to let go, to become still and empty, so that you can get filled up with what really satisfies, and that is relationship. God-filled relationship. And that emptying and that filling is God's grace. And the poor are being given good things, of course, is God's grace. That's a lot easier to see because the poor need good things that they don't currently have. God's grace poured into that long ago broken world of ruptured relationships in the person of Jesus Christ, who practiced compassion at dinner parties and everywhere else he went. And God's grace pours into our broken world as well. When you have eyes to see it and ears to hear it, it is all over the place. Literally all over the place. It's a whirlpool. You know that you might have Maytag, right? Some of us have Whirlpool, Maytag, Whirlpool. Discovered that kids were missing school because rent and food took all the money. No money left for detergent or the laundromat or to pay the PG&E bill to power the washing machine. Kids weren't lazy. They weren't going to school because they didn't have clean clothes to wear and they didn't want to go smelling. So Whirlpool, this last year, Whirlpool piloted a program where they donated washers and dryers to school in St. Louis, Missouri and Fairfield, California, so kids could get their laundry cleaned while they were in class. And you know what the result of this grace-filled caring was? An increase, dramatic increase in attendance. 90% of participating students dramatically increased their school attendance. 20 more schools are going to get those washers and dryers this year. God's grace enacted through corporate caring. And God's grace pours in through everyday acts of caring that go completely unnoticed. A man without a home writes a note to one of our outreach team members about how much her noticing and caring has meant to him. A preschool teacher takes in the beauty of Eve's Peak. Right back here, we took a hike on Friday with all the preschool teachers, and they encourage us to hold more services up on that hill, that beauty of that hill. Policemen, of which we have some in our congregation, policemen kiss their loved ones goodbye and go out to try to help people day after day. Priests continue to offer God's love and sacraments in every corner of the world, regardless of danger. People go to superhuman lengths to try to help those in distress after disasters like the earthquake in Italy, the fires in California, the floods in Louisiana. God's grace pours into each and every one of our lives when we greet each other after a long week out in the world, right? Doesn't it feel good when you come here and you see each other? That's God's grace. When Art and Lynn and Beverly's music pours like balm into our souls. God's grace. God's grace. Look out for it this week. It's often subtle, and it's easy to take it for granted, but it's there. Healing brokenness, establishing connection, enabling communion. God's grace pours into our broken world through every available nook and cranny, and it's most evident for old times person and the power of Jesus Christ, who stands forever as a living testimony to a table fellowship where everyone is welcome, where no one is better than anyone else, where it's okay to be broken, and where healing is always at hand. Amen.